Good afternoon. Welcome to the latest edition of the MBtv Rui Cunha Foundation debate series. We're back after a summer break, and we are very pleased to be able to have this conversation again here at Rui Cunha Foundation. We'd like to welcome you all that are following us on Facebook and also those who are joining us here at Rui Cunha Foundation. We have been talking about over these last couple of years in this series about a number of matters related, of course, to the city's social economic development. And today, what brings us here is Macau's economy, the way forward. After almost 3 years into the COVID-19 pandemic, Macau's economy is struggling to get back on its feet, while businesses and society look forward to a post-pandemic normality. A distinguished panel of business leaders and experts will discuss the path towards economic recovery. And we are honored for having with us this panel of experts, business leaders. We are joined as speakers by Mr. Kevin Ho, President of the Industry and Commerce Association of Macau, and also a Macau Deputy to the National People's Congress, Mr. Rui Pedro Cunha, who is here on his capacity as President of the Macau European Chamber of Commerce, and is also President of Rui Cunha Foundation. We have Mr. José Luís Marques, President of the Institute of European Studies of Macau, and Professor Henry Lay, Assistant Professor in Business Economics at the University of Macau. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. And this talk takes place, which is jointly held by Macau Business and Rui Cunha Foundation. This talk takes place at a critical juncture, with the public tender to award the gaming concessions in motion, and also just a couple of days after Chief Executive Hoi Tseng announced that mainland China package tours and electronic visas will return by the end of October, early November, and that will be where I'd like to start, Mr. Kevin Ho. Let's take the pulse of the local economy, and I'd like you to comment on the state of affairs of the city's economy and businesses, and also considering the latest announcement made by Chief Executive Hoi Tseng.
First of all, thank you for inviting me. I was invited to this forum more than a week ago, so I was preparing what to say, and obviously my mood has changed a lot from 2 days ago. I was expecting to start crying once you asked me, but now I think finally we are seeing the light from the tunnel. The economy is at this moment, of course, it's not as healthy as we expected, as we want to be. After almost 3 years of the whole pandemic, we have survived, mainly because we have the faith and because of a lot of administration influences and banking helps and government loans, subsidies. If it wasn't Macau, if it wasn't such a small society and such a small economy, when relationship matters more, I think we will see a lot more closures. We are lucky that we are in a city that values friendship, values cooperation times, so we can have the banks lending a helping hand, extending a lot of different timelines so we can survive. But there is a limit to survivals. So this year we can see a lot of people are starting to be more desperate and more thinking to close the business, and of course not to mention there are a lot of closures already. So I think at some point in time, business entrepreneurs, it's all about confidence. If we are confident in the future, then we will try to survive. If we are not, then we will decide to think otherwise. 2 days ago, when the Chinese government announced that we will have 4 provinces and 1 city starting to bring back some package tours, e-visas, tourist visas, I think it is a great sign that to show that Macau has done a good job. we are not comparing ourselves to neighbor cities because it's a totally different scenario. But what Macau has to and what Macau wants to do is what we want in the future. But what Macau now needs is our mainland tourists, is our main tourism to be back. So with this announcement, hopefully, if nothing happens and nothing worsens, we are expecting a healthier November and a happier December.
And then we'll have Chinese New Year, and then spring, right?
Well, we can't be too optimistic now
Yeah.
because every time when we are too optimistic, things happen. So let's stay calm.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Mr. Kevin Ho. Mr. Rui Pedro Cunha, from the perspective of the Macau European Chamber of Commerce and of the businesses here, what would you like to share with us with regards to like taking the pulse of the sentiment, and how much of a game changer can this be, or perhaps it's more of a stepping stone towards what many people are hoping for, which is an effective, broad reopening. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for the invitation to be here. I believe that I agree with Kevin that this announcement by the chief executive is very, very welcome. I think everyone was expecting this to happen a little bit sooner, but it didn't. It happened now. It's going to happen first on 4 provinces, not all of China, but those are the main provinces that are the markets of Macau. So it's very good news. Still, this is not what Macau needs to focus on the long run. For now, for the economy that we have in Macau, this is excellent news. For the economy we need to have in 10 years, this is side news.
Yes.
Okay. Regarding European businesses, the European Chamber of Commerce is composed mainly of local companies of European inspiration, but many local companies, and they have suffered through these last 3 years just as much as the other businesses. It's been hard, it's been tough. Some have closed, but most of them are still here and hopeful for the future.
Thank you. José, Mr. José Luís Salles Marques, in addition, of course, to being president of the Institute of European Studies, you're also well-seasoned economist. Looking at the overall macroeconomic situation, of course, when we came across the figures for the second quarter of the SAR's gross domestic product, we're talking about a 39% plunge year on year in GDP, and other indicators are of major concern. And how do you look at this, taking the pulse of the economic structure of the SAR so far this year, and what can we expect in the coming few months, considering the announcement by the chief executive?
Okay, thank you very much, first of all, for having me here, and I would like also to address to my colleagues. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and also with the audience. My first take on what we are having here is that exactly 2022 was probably the worst year within the last, I don't know, several decades. Because we had something good coming out in 2021. We saw some kind of recovery at the beginning, but then everything went down. And I think maybe as worse, as bad as the economic result, I think it is also what it makes to people's expectation, belief, trust in the future, and so many other psychological, social, and family issues, and so on and so forth. So we had a very, very bad year up to now. And I think if you look at the Economist Intelligence Unit, I think yesterday or a few days ago, they expect Macau economy even to go down a little bit more. I think they are expecting something like minus 30% for 2022. But fortunately, and I'm moderate, I have a moderately optimistic about the future, and let's hope nothing happens, and that's the main thing. But I think that we can foresee some changes or some improvement, because at this particular moment, what is really important is the economic recovery, and this must be the priority: economic recovery. Without economic recovery, it's very easy to talk about the future, but to think about what should be done, then I think we need to have more stability. We need to see at least some light at the end of the tunnel, and I hope that what the Chief Executive announced and the opening that is announced for after October the 1st, which I would, personally, I would very much like these measures taken already now, to make the best out of the Golden Week. But that is not what is going to happen, but hopefully it will help until the end of the year.
Thank you. Professor Henry Lay, you have been studying also the measures that the government has been rolling out, the rounds of packages, and more recently the rounds of 10 billion patakas packages to assist individuals and businesses. And you have written about the effectiveness of that. And in fact, the chief executive himself, he acknowledged that this is like a palliative solution, or surely is not a mid to long-term fix. What is your take on this in terms of public policy and on the potential impact of the new measures coming from the central government and, of course, announced by Hoya Tseng?
Okay.
Thank you.
Firstly, thank you very much for the invitation. It's my honor to be able to share opinions with the other VIPs and guests and experts. In light of the recently announced measures, that is another round of subsidies of 8,000 pataka to the households, I'll consider it as a sort of like emergency measures tackling the high unemployment rate of Macau, which was 5.4%. Let's see what's the number next week, the 30th. They'll announce the latest number. Honestly speaking, it is more on like the safety net and protection to the residents, that they are able to have like some extra materials, resources to spend, especially for those unemployed. We understand that if it is distributed in the form of like this kind of 8,000 e-payment card, probably the household would spend it in a way like to support their day-to-day activities, also given the daily ceiling of 300. So it's obviously not exactly to support a particular sector of the economy, but serving to help the households, which is also similar to the previous round of support, the 5,000 plus 3,000. I believe that the government made this decision because of the like forecastable outcome, okay, that would support the households to overcome the immediate difficulties they face. Talking about the reopening of the package tours and the e-visa, it definitely is a piece of good news. And I'm more on the optimistic side that it is the first time in the past so-called almost 3 years to allow online application, giving the conveniency of the tourists from China. And also we need to consider that probably Macau is still the only like non-mainland region that the visitors can travel, at least at the moment. So Macau is attractive to a certain extent, okay, to the mainland visitors. So with this sort of like liberalization, I am more on the optimistic side, hoping that it brings about at least a better business sentiment. For example, I really hope and believe that some businesses, especially in the tourism sector, they may change their mind. Because of this piece of good news, they may try to stay in business for another 1 to 2 months to observe whether there's a better chance of survival and recovery. So at least it gives them some hopes. This is my views. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Of course, looming larger is the issue of the dynamic zero COVID policy, and Macau is following to a great extent the mainland China approach, of course, with some adaptations, but contrary to Hong Kong, which effectively has departed from that. Kevin Ho, so when we look at what may happen in the coming months, the question that most analysts have in mind is when and how will mainland China evolve from the current approach to dynamic zero COVID?
First of all, thank you. And why don't you remind me of my remote mic? So I was promoting the foundation for a while just now. The dynamic zero COVID policy was a successful policy for our country. Imagine, let's take some data from other countries. We have 1.4 billion people. If a mere 5% of the people caught a COVID back then, of course, it's much lighter now. And these people, the death rate of these people are pretty high. The hospital rate is very high. And the problem is because they occupied the hospital and that will affect people that was supposed to enjoy the normal medication, then that's why we have been adopting the dynamic zero policy till now. When it's going to relax and whether Macau's adaptation was a correct one, I have to share my own, it is my pure personal views. We cannot compare ourselves with Hong Kong. We're a much smaller city with a very different economic background. We do not have a very big financial system, so we don't. We are more affected than Hong Kong because Hong Kong, as you can see, the retails, the other businesses are affected, but the financial systems are basically fine because it's more online because they can deal without being present in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is more international with the Hong Kong International Airport. It is a hub for the world. Macau is not only because we are a smaller city and our airports are more tailored to Asian and mainly mainland cities. The major difference between Hong Kong and Macau is we have an average 120,000 people living in Zhuhai and traveling to Macau every day. There is no such thing in Hong Kong and Shenzhen. So Hong Kong can close its border and open up to the international market. Macau cannot, because not only for the economy, because of our people that we live day in, day out through two cities. China, on the other hand, you were asking me when can we expect, I was asking this question to myself every single day. From what I gathered, all this data information, World Health Organization has announced last week that this pandemic is almost going to the end. I think, with a responsible country like our country, China, I think they will follow strictly by the recommendation and the instruction by the World Health Organization. So if the WHO lowered the pandemic level to level 2, I think it's time that we open up.
So there would be something to follow pretty closely.
You have to call WHO to
yes,
ask this
exactly.
question.
And Mr. Kevin Ho was pointing out the fact that about 120,000 people, they actually commute on a daily basis, living in Zhuhai and then coming to work in Macau. That's about 20% of the overall population. And if you think about the workforce, then yes, the percentage will be higher. Surely, when this matter is regarded from the perspective of foreign investors or what is normally called as expat community, Rui Pedro Cunha. Then, of course, for obvious reasons, is not easy to weather this, right? What could you share with us in that respect in terms of the professional and business
it's
community?
not easy to weather this also because the businesses working here, even those owned by expats, also depend on the labor that are non-resident workers. So many of the people working at our companies also reside in Zhuhai and cross the border every day. It's not easy going through this. Now it's even a little bit more complicated because it's very difficult to hire non-resident workers. And it's understandable that there is priority for the residents, but for the businesses, this is a big problem because not all the residents have the same skill set as some of the non-resident workers.
And to some extent, I would venture in saying that they are kind of between a rock and a hard place, because then, as you were pointing out, it is very hard to hire foreign labor coming from abroad, actually fresh foreign labor coming from outside the mainland.
That's even more complicated, especially if you're talking about qualified residents. I was checking just before coming here. I don't have the statistics for last year, but for 2020 and 2021, only three people were allowed to come into Macau as residents, qualified labor. If we're talking about diversifying the economy and having a higher skill set in Macau, this is not sustainable. We really need to change this policy and allow qualified foreigners to come into Macau and to help develop the economy of Macau.
That's an important point, and I would like to bring José Luís Marques into the conversation. A talent attraction scheme, we have a system that is to be rolled out, a new one, but the one that we still have in hands and has been in effect is been labeled as highly ineffective, so to say, and an obstacle for the whole wider project of modernizing the economy and to have the skilled labor force in some areas that the city needs. How do you address this? And in terms of suggestions, what can be done to change track?
Well, I think that the main point, if we really want to attract talents to work in Macau, first of all, we need to make them feel they are really most welcome. And I think sometimes the communication about that is not very clear. And I think we need to work much better about how to communicate to people who we want to be here, that we really appreciate their input and the fact that they choose Macau to be their home and the home of their family and so on. Okay, so this is the first thing. But of course, mostly is to have clear guidelines. I think we need to know or to show or to address which sectors of our economy are those that we really need first of all. And I think, of course, financial sector might be one of those, right? And then there are others which has to do very much with the very highly skilled technologies and so on, that we do not have people for that. And I think that I also work in academia, as Henry, I think Henry knows that better than I, but the fact is we do need to have these talents. And eventually, we could just make use of the talents we already have in Macau. I've been addressing this issue for a long time. We have hundreds, thousands of students from the mainland. They are excellent students. Many of them, they go back and they find job next day or something like that. And they get prizes and everything. But then we don't allow them to be here. I think this is a nonsense. And it's a nonsense because they are here in Macau. Their studies are being subsidized by the Macau government, by the Macau people's money. But then we send them away. So what's the point? I think we should first of all make use or try to make better use of all the talents we already have in Macau and find a way to let them stay. I know that is a very sensitive issue, but we can eventually find a way to do that.
Because you're pointing out that the Macau SAR government is investing, already investing, and is not reaping the benefits.
Of course, you might say, oh, but they pay very high fees, and we know, but maybe there is still some costs that are subsidized by the Macau government for them to be here and to study here and to their PhD and their master degrees in Macau.
Thank you. So, Professor Henry Lay, the issue of labor is pivotal, and it seems not to be very easy to strike just the right balance. What kind of recommendations would you have in that respect?
Okay, talks about non-resident labor or specialist experts. In fact, as what Dr. Marques has mentioned, I come from a sector with very high percentage of non-resident experts. There are many professors, okay, from mainland China and the rest of the world working in Macau. This is an example showing that we need this team of specialist experts to train our local students, or in the other sector, if we have similar imported non-resident workers, they can help to train our workforce, our labor force, provide them with the experience that we lack of, especially when we talk about like modern financial services, the R&D, the high-tech sector, the national key laboratories. We need this team of like specialists. I also want to recall what Dr. Marques has mentioned, the graduate. In fact, a lot of my undergraduate students, after finishing they're from mainland, after finishing the first degree, they went to Hong Kong, Singapore, because they want to stay there. They understand that if they do well, they receive job opportunities, they can stay in Hong Kong, get their green card, and then settle down. This is the kind of career path that they choose. So it proves to be somehow successful. And I think the most important point is we need to have comprehensive standard on what is so-called experts, why they are qualified to stay. Do we really lack of these so-called experts and their contribution to Macau? Not only filling up positions without local appropriate candidate, but how can they bring up to improve the qualifications, the experience of our local workforce? If we are able to work out some sort of standard which receive the consensus of the society, I think it is possible to implement this kind of new so-called policy on imported workforce. This is my feeling.
And obviously, in this respect, one can look at best practices and benchmarking in terms of other somewhat similar jurisdictions and their strategy to attract people. This also would be related to Kevin Ho, to the wider aim of suitable or moderate diversification of the economy. So I use the word diversification only 30 minutes after we started, but of course we will be also mentioning diversification in gaming, of course. In order to move ahead with that, which seems to be a mid to long-term project of diversifying the economy, in the 4 key areas that have been singled out by the central government and also to be implemented here in the region, we need people, right? We need people with the right skills. How do you, what's your take on this?
First of all, I think the new four main pillars, the new four main pillars that we want to diversify is the right direction. But it is a long way to get to this goal. We should not, and we are not realistic to expect this to happen in a year or two, even when we were in our peak times. The reason why we have to diversify is we have been overly reliant on the tourist gaming industry in the past. The word diversification means we have to split out some of our attention from one big chunk. But this big chunk is gone now. We have no more this big chunk. So in my own opinion, we should focus on filling our stomach first, and then we look at our dreams. In terms of talents, the new four pillars that we have, of course, we always think we have very good talents in Macau, and we do, but we just don't have enough. And how we can attract more people over, first of all, I think locally we have to switch our mentality that these talents who is going to come is not to fight for a job with you, because you will never be able to fight with them. We should be very realistic about this. It's not good. It's not something good to listen to, but it's the reality. But if we can attract them to come over, they will teach you to be more appropriate for your next stage. I think our own Macau citizens should be fully aware of where we stand and where we should be in the future. I remember earlier when you mentioned the question, how can we attract talents? We don't have to find ways to attract talents. We know, of course, we have a lot of different policies in different mainland cities. We can have those policies. Look back in our old times, 2004, 2005, when we first opened up our gaming industries. The whole world's best talent in the gaming industry flocked in. Everybody. You don't have to ask them to come in. They wanted to come in. And they were paid double, triple the wages to come in. And not only the gaming people, the construction people, engineers, architects. And now where are they now? Dubai. Because the market is in Dubai now. The future is in Dubai. So how can we attract people with our new pillars? I think first we have to have the strategy, and then we have to have, especially local people, have an open mind with an open arms to welcome them in, and use them to benefit us for the future.
Thank you. And so in order for these pillars to shine high on the hill, when, let's say, for instance, when we look at what happened 20 years ago, was that Macau was able to attract the top players at the global scale in the gaming industry and resorts industry. So, Rui Pedro Cunha, in those pillars that have been singled out, so we should be able, or we should be aiming at, I shall say, attracting world-renowned investment, foreign direct investment, top-notch, prime, so then the rest will come, the other businesses will come, there will be a spillover effect, there will be spin-offs, and there will be talents queuing up again to come to Macau. Would that be the case? And how to get there is the question, of course.
I hope so. I hope that will be the case. I think that can be the case. I think the first thing we need to do is allow them to come, because we are not allowing them to come right now. First thing, we need to allow them, and after that, we need to attract them. And I think both things are possible. Macau has shown before it can do it. Macau has a very attractive, for example, tax system, both for individuals and for companies. But no big international company is going to move to Macau if their directors cannot move to Macau with their families. So that would be nonsense to believe that's possible. I think it's possible if we change the policies and we allow foreigners to come into Macau, get residency permits, and settle down in Macau, make this their home, be able to move here with their families, and create new companies and help the economy develop. I think that's really the case.
So reopening is the key word, right? and José Luís reopening as soon as possible, reopening to attract investment, reopening to bring those talents, reopening to bring the international visitors
Yes, I think the
from
key,
abroad, I mean.
basically, why do we need to diversify? Because we need to build up resilience to external shocks, right? This is the main issue, okay? So, but as Kevin mentioned, diversification is a long-term effort. It requires not only government can give the guidelines, but private sector are those who are going to do diversification, who are going to invest, train, hire, whatever, okay? And take the risk of diversification, private sector. So we need this to be very well worked out between government and private sector. But this, as I said, is something that needs to be done as a process, okay? The second thing is, so for now, what do we need to do? We need to recover the economy, as I mentioned. We need to go back to a point where we feel comfortable. The Macau economy is comfortable, to face future challenges. We need to build up that kind of status. And to do that, I think that the only way, because we are going to still be in this kind of constraint for quite some time. We still need tourists, gaming, and things to go smooth and to grow. So the key for that is actually, and I think everybody agrees with that, is to find at the proper moment, and I take into account all the considerations in regard to the Macau dependency on the mainland market and the constraints that comes with that and so on and so forth. So we need to take that into consideration. But at the right moment to open up in the most, let's say, I wouldn't want to use the word radical, but yes, but I would say in the most radical way. I mean, we need to do it really and with all our efforts.
Thank you. So reopening and the issue of the structure of the economy and of public revenue. Last time I checked, when I did my maths, I mean, Professor Henry Lay, are we before a structural deficit problem, meaning that for how many more years will we need to rely on capital revenue, meaning that revenue coming from the fiscal reserve to make up for the structural deficit that we may face, while gaming revenue will not go back to, let's say, 60% of what it was in 2019?
It is a difficult question to answer. Firstly, we need to understand the fact that is, I agree with Dr. Marques. We need the tourism sector. We need the casino. For what? First, for the unemployed. We have right now 16,000 people. They have no time to receive training. They have no time to take another degree to learn to be an expert in the finance sector. We need jobs for them. We need to solve this urgency problem. If it worsens, it brings about social instability. This is the fact. So we need tourists from China. We need tourism. Second, please think about which sector in the short run, in 1 to 2 years, can bring about substantial tax revenue to the government. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, it is still the gaming sector. Okay? We charge 40% on their gross gaming revenue to support government fiscal expenditure. So this is still the gaming sector to be the major source of tax revenue of the government. And this cannot be changed in the short run. Okay? I have been discussing this with friends, colleagues, and if we look at Hong Kong, with such a well-developed financial market, as a regional financial center, the kind of stamp duty it can collect, okay, is not as large as our gaming tax revenue from the casinos. So the point is, even we have a well-established finance sector as good as Hong Kong, it is in doubt if we can collect as much tax, okay, as we did from the gaming sector in the past. This is the problem. So my understanding of diversification or adequate diversification is first to make good use of the gaming and tourism sector to fulfill our needs of like fiscal revenue, job vacancy. Then we talk about not over-relying on the gaming and tourism sector, use more resources to earn the tax revenue to invest in the 4 pillar industries of, well, modern finance and R&D, high tech, etc., etc.
Thank you. I would now like to invite our audience to jump in and to join the discussion, to share with us remarks and the questions for the panel to answer. So who would like to be the first one? Mr. Eduardo Ambrosio, please, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your invitation for this debate today. Very, very interesting indeed. I would like to point out that Macau really needs diversification. But most of the people have forgotten that Macau is a platform between China and the Portuguese-speaking countries. We are about 240 million of population residents in 9 countries around the world. But we tend to forget this role. Then Macau should play a more important role because we can do more trading with these countries. But what we miss in Macau, really, see, I've been fighting for this scheme for the last 20 years, is the export credit insurance. Hong Kong is a very successful trading port because the government subsidized the export credit insurance. Any company in Hong Kong who export below 10 million Hong Kong dollars is free from any premium. They don't pay premium at all. It means the government is subsidized. You see, the government is helping. Hong Kong does not have many industry, but the point is that Hong Kong is serving as the role of the factories in China. They export the Chinese products to around the world. Hong Kong is a trading port. In Macau can be the same. But why in the past 20 years the government had done nothing to start this scheme? It's very, very important. Any big countries in the world, any big cities, Hong Kong, Peking, Guangzhou, every big city have a credit export insurance to assist the exporters to export their goods. Now the economy in Portugal is very good. In Angola, it's getting better and better. Brazil exported a lot to China. But we are looking for the ship to go because we cannot do nothing. If we export to this country, we have to bear all our own risk. Nobody will do that, you see, for $100 million. We can purchase insurance. We can cover our exports. I think, you see, we can benefit. It's the way to diversify our industry very, very shortly because the biggest factory port is in Guangzhou, in Guangdong, the Guangdong province. There's so many things to export to Angola. I've been exporting motorcycles for the last 20 years. I've been importing coffee from Brazil, from East Timor, but all at my own risk. I think this is one scheme that the government should think about introducing in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eduardo Ambrosio. Mr. Kevin Ho, why don't we have an export credit insurance scheme? I mean, or do we need, and would that be a way forward? And also the issue of how to make the most of this function that our city has with regards to connecting China with the Portuguese-speaking countries. It's something that has been established nearly 20 years ago, the forum, and how to take it to a higher level.
Well, first of all, the export resurgence is a very normal thing in many parts of the world. I think we should. I think Ecuador should continue to voice out, to bring in more attention. Especially we are now, after 20-something years, we seem to have forget our platformed role. But as far as I know, we are picking up now from the new building that we have built. There is a very nice exhibition place for all these Portuguese-speaking countries' products. I think we should utilize this moment to start doing more platform businesses. What you have been, if I have a chance, I'll help you voice out to the government as well. But there must be issues or there must be restraints that the government has not done such a normal thing yet. But I will not comment on this, but I'll try to voice out for you.
And about the taking to a higher level relations with the Portuguese-speaking countries and how to boost the role of Macau and to make this even more relevant.
I think it is not something that we can be done if we really want to do, because we have tried. We were the platform for the Portuguese-speaking countries, and overlooking the past 20 years, if you tell me there is no business dealings between Portuguese-speaking countries and China, no, there is, but they are too big for Macau to handle. So after all these big infrastructures deal was done, I think because Macau is more towards the service side and more towards the trading side, I think once we have the connection built, it's time that we gradually move into the second phase, the third phase of the trading platform. And China has evolved from the exporting countries to a big import market of the world. I think now we can look into more products from the Portuguese-speaking countries. So for example, as I know from Ecuador, olive oil, red wine from Portugal, cashew nuts, for example, bits by bits, that we can start to use Macau as a platform. The relocation of the headquarters for the Sino-Portuguese Fund in Macau will hopefully make an impact, but this is yet to be seen. But of course, as a person who is pushing for a more influential role for Macau being the platform for the Portuguese-speaking countries and China, I will do more over the next 3 years.
Thank you, Mr. Kevin. Mr. Rui Pedro Cunha, well, this is something that we highly, at least I would say that most likely in this panel is highly cherished, the role of Macau as a platform between China and Portuguese-speaking countries. And obviously, surely the Macau European Chamber of Commerce is also pushing forward with this agenda. How can we take it to a higher level in this, hopefully, post-pandemic situation?
Well, Macau has been trying to do this already for 20 years, and I think we can say we have not been very successful. I don't hold the key to know what will make it happen, unfortunately. Otherwise, I would be very happy.
Yes.
But I think that just like Mr. Eduardo Ambrosio, we need to persevere. Mr. Eduardo Ambrosio has been pushing for this export insurance for a long time. Almost every time we talk, he reminds me of this, and I think he's absolutely right. It's something that might not affect a lot of people because there are not a lot of exporters here in Macau, and maybe that's the reason why the government hasn't done this yet. I don't know, I'm speculating. Maybe that's the reason, but it would be very helpful for people that are trying to export starting from Macau. We should remember that in the 1980s, Macau was a big export hub, and part of China developed in part thanks to the role of Macau, exporting some goods that were manufactured in China and then transformed in Macau and exported to the rest of the world. Then in the 1990s and early 2000s, we shifted to a more service-oriented economy. And that's what we are doing right now, mainly services, not that much products and trading. But it's something that we can and should be working on. We should not forget.
Thank you. Mr. José Salles Marques, the credit insurance scheme indeed, and also getting the platform right to so it can effectively take off and fly high.
Well, I think, as I said, I think all of us, we at some point we advocate something regarding the platform, right? Or brought something regarding the platform. So it's been an exercise for 20 years now. But I see that recently, I don't know if this is a trend or it's just because we had the COVID, you know, and then we need to push forward some of the policies of the government, including those that are included in the 5-year plan to 2025. And I had the opportunity to look at the plan, and many of for instance, the Chinese medicine, modern finance, what else?
Every single aspect has a Portuguese-speaking connection, right?
There are many things in the plan that has a connection with the Portuguese-speaking countries. Even one very interesting, which is the development of a jewelry industry, diamond cutting, things like that. You think about that, and you see Portuguese-speaking countries written over there, right? And also tourism. Why not? Tourism is something that is a little bit far away, but if we manage to develop also the link or the linkages or the of our international airport, if we develop that further, then we can start thinking about that, you know, to be something like a go-between, a place where people from Portuguese-speaking countries would arrive in China and where people from China would take the plane out to somewhere else. Why not? I think everything is possible, but that will require time as well and a lot of investment.
Sure. Professor Henry Lay, on the one hand, we have a political direction which keeps on emphasizing Macau's role as a platform with Portuguese-speaking countries and hooking up the Greater Bay Area Plan, the Belt and Road Initiative, and even the in-depth cooperation zone in Hangshin, and bringing this Lusophone connectivity of Macau into the equation. On the other hand, some people would, or some analysts would call it a sort of expectations capability gap when it comes to the ability to deliver. What's your take on this?
I believe that we can do more and do something more solid in order to overcome the so-called current dilemma that we are facing. We have been talking about this for 20 years. I understand, I also agree with Mr. Horst that there is increasing volume of trade between the Portuguese-speaking countries on the natural resources side, but the country and these Portuguese countries are doing something really big that we do not have the capability to even touch. We understand that in the past few years, the things has changed. We have a lot of improvement that the central government give Macau lots of support to allocate some of these so-called jobs duties to local commercial banks to do the settlement. This is the direction. And we need to, for example, take advantage of the policy preferences of, in the short run, the intensive cooperative zone in Hangshin to do really more solid, to build up, for example, centers, to set up subsidies, to show that we want to do more in order to receive more support either from the SAR government or from the central government. Then I believe that it will be a perfect time to raise a lot of suggestions, for example, subsidizing the import, credit insurance, etc., etc. This is the appropriate time. The point is, we talk too much, but we are not able to show at least something really solid, okay? Something that we can sell, we can promote as the outcome that we have done. Because in the past 2 decades, we have been focusing on tourism, gaming. This is the problem. We do not have enough time and energy to touch the so-called the platform road of Macau.
The platform, which is a service platform, and then also has a component of people-to-people exchanges and education and culture. In that respect, some would say, before the pandemic, there were some steps taken in that direction. I'd like to invite Paul, please.
Yes, could you give us a brief overview of the relationship now between the EU and Macau, particularly in the present environment, which is changing radically? And as a subset of that, one notices that in the the Lusophone countries, there's only 3 big markets: Brazil, Portugal, and Angola. The rest are not really significant. And of course, Portugal is a key influential state in the EU. So one would imagine that to the extent that EU is looking strategically at Macau, they would be evaluating the use of Portugal as a platform to establish particular relationships with Macau in any type of industry that Macau or the 2 entities would want to develop. So could you give us an overview first of EU-China relationships, and then also the extent to which the EU has actually effectively viewed Portugal as the key market for the development of the diversification of the Macau economy?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for the question. Who would like to contribute? Well, of course, the president of the Institute of European Studies, the president of the Macau European Chamber of Commerce.
I don't have any official
yes, of course.
role, okay? That's, my institute belongs to Macau.
To Macau, of course.
Actually funded by Macau government, okay? But I think that in the past few years, also because maybe it's been hard to move around and to connect person to person. EU and Macau relations are just, I would say, kept to the minimum, okay? Not really that much to say about it. Of course, maybe when there will be some new meetings or something like that happening, eventually we can see something more. But overall, the relationship suffers from this geopolitical, I would say, environment that we are living in, and this is not really very good. It's not very helpful. That's what I can say.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Rui Pedro Cunha, Professor Paul Spooner's question on the European connection.
Through Portugal.
Through Portugal,
yes.
Exactly.
Let me say also that MECC is a local association.
Obviously.
Not directly related with the European Union. I think Portugal can have a role to play. It would be maybe useful if some of the relationship between the European Union and China went through Macau. I think we would all appreciate that. I think that does not exist. There are bilateral relations between the European Union and China, and I would say most of the issues are dealt that way, not through Macau. Both European Union and China have very strong diplomatic ties. They've been negotiating the CAI already for many
Comprehensive
years.
Agreement on Investment, which is on the back burner, but
which is on the back burner, and let's hope it goes ahead, because that will help the relationship between the European Union and China. As long as there is political will to make that happen, I hope that it will happen, because it will be good for both the European Union and for China, and in a certain way also good for Macau.
Thank you. Mr. Kevin Ho, you have been investing in Portugal. You have a strong connection with Portugal. What could you share with us in this respect?
Well, investing in Portugal is purely a business decision. When I make that decision, I'm not looking at the Portuguese-speaking countries. I'm just looking at the returns. But what Paul was mentioning, I'm not an expert like my dear colleagues here. But if you look at EU and the tension between EU and China on the news. And if you look at the direct investment by the EU companies in China, you see a different picture. You think there is a lot of tensions, you think we're fighting, but direct investment grew 20% last year. So business is business. I think business people and entrepreneurs will look into ways to explore business when there is a chance. And that's why Macau has not been very successful in being the mediator between EU and China, because in the past, Hong Kong was the role through UK. Now, can we utilize this opportunity? Whether we will use this opportunity, I think we should. As an entrepreneur, you've mentioned Portuguese-speaking countries. We have the big three countries: Angola, Portugal, and Brazil. To me, it is Africa, South America, and Europe. So I think we should utilize this.
Thank you. Would you like to add something here, Professor Henry Late?
If we look at, in fact, the connection between Macau and EU, truly speaking, especially after the pandemic, we are not able to receive visitors from Europe, nor even visitors from Portugal. So honestly, the pandemic should have can be regarded as a sort of panic to the European connection of Macau, including that with Portugal. Also, if we look at the trade figures, well, because of the decreasing number of visitors, in fact, Macau import much less of the European, probably the luxury products to serve our incoming visitors. Okay, that affect also the so-called economic types between Europe, Portugal, and Macau. However, I really hope that in line with the gradual recovery of our tourism sector and the Macau economy, we are able to so-called resume our momentum and dynamic with our economic linkages with the Portugal and Europe. And also, another point is if we invest continuously in the development of the popular industry and diversification, I believe that we can do a lot more in terms of economic and technological cooperations with Portugal and Europe. So this is my very general views on this topic.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, one or two questions. Please go ahead. You can introduce yourself.
Good evening. This is Kenneth. Since for the 2 decades, I think, the gambling industry is the main business in Macau. Just like Mr. Kelvin Ho said, it's a big trunk in Macau, and most business is developed based on this big industry. However, rumors said that maybe Japan and Thailand would develop the gambling industry. Since more competitor in this business, I think Macau would have a low tile on the economy, but the government, I know it is pushing to develop the 4 major industry, but do you have any opinion on this issue?
Thank you very much. I will now move on to a sort of a final round before we have on this side we address the questions. Maria, João, please.
Thank you.
Yes, please go ahead. Yes,
Okay.
yes. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to say that I fully agree with Mr. Ambrosio about the comments. Actually, I agree with everyone. But I would like to say that we also need. Okay. Thank you. We also need to think about when we have the products. Macau tries to be the platform. Is our orientation. Is the guideline. But then when we want to play this role, and then when we want, and when I say we, I say business people in Macau or on the Portuguese-speaking countries. When we want to cross the border, go to mainland China, we have problems in exporting our products or selling our products. Okay, now I know that we have Chun. Actually, may I? Now I know that we have Chun. It's a very good initiative, very good idea, very good support from central government. But still, Chun is not a market. Okay, it's a step on the market. And we are now organizing, I know that is organizing all the dispatch of the goods, having only one control and not two controls. But anyway, what really matters is for us is going from Chun to mainland China. And we know that there are some barriers to export certain products. I talk about my association, that is FELP, the Portuguese-speaking countries association, and we want to export coffee or cashew nuts or whatever, and we have problems. We cannot find a way of going there. So we also need the help of the Macau government, SAR government, not only for the issue you mentioned, but also about easing the export of the products from Portuguese-speaking countries to mainland China.
Thank you very much. And I will now like to ask my esteemed guest speakers to address. So we have two questions here. One from Mr. Ken on the rising competition, existing Asian jurisdictions, gaming jurisdictions, and future gaming jurisdictions. How will Macau cope with that? And then the issue of Chun and mobility, of course, of people, but also being able to overcome the barriers that are, the hurdles that are still in place. Who would like to start?
Maybe I should.
Kevin,
Maybe I should. Because Ken was addressing to me. I'm not a person in the tourism industry, so I'll try my best in my own knowledge to answer your question. First of all, the CE has already mentioned in his last address that in the future, we are still expecting tourism/gaming plus expo industry to account for 40% of our GDP. So undoubtedly, it will still be our major industry in Macau. So this is not something that we should question. And even with the four main pillars, future four main pillars, this extremely big pillar will still be our bread and butter. In 1999, when we have our handover, 2002, when we announced our gaming decentralization, Macau was a small place. We had Vegas back then. We had Monte Carlo. We had the whole of Europe. We had other parts of the countries that have casinos. We were tiny. Over the past 20 years, we were the biggest gaming town in the world. We were 6 times of Las Vegas. During these 20 years, we have Philippines, we have some of the Asian countries, we have Singapore. Now, looking at the next 10 years, yes, Japan may be coming, Thailand may be coming, Dubai may be coming. But we are used to facing challenges and overcoming those challenges. The question is how we can make ourselves the hub for people to come and spend their time, enjoy their life, and lead Macau as the leisure tourism hub. Gaming in the future will be part of our tourism. It's not the other way around. So I think as long as we, with Chun and with the Greater Bay Area, we have to design more products for business customers, for family tourists, for individual tourists to come and enjoy their time in Macau and extend their days. I think that through this, Macau will still be a very influential city in the world.
Thank you. Luís, go ahead.
I totally agree with Kevin. We've seen many jurisdictions come and go, and Thailand and Japan will be for sure big competitors in the future. But we should focus on tourism and not only on gaming, because they already have tourism and they're good at it. So we need to focus on tourism and make sure that we are more attractive than they are, so that people will want to come to Macau, not only for the gaming, but for a more diversified and interesting tourism. And with the I wouldn't say downfall, but with the reduction of gaming, there are also some opportunities. Because, for example, the MICE sector, and I remember a talk a couple of years ago that I learned that the reason why the MICE sector was not a success in Macau, it was because there were no rooms available, because all the rooms were taken up by the casinos. This is an opportunity.
By the junkets.
By the junkets. So this is an opportunity. If there are much less people gambling, there are more rooms available. And if there are more rooms available, why don't we invest in the MICE sector? Just last week, I was at a conference by the Hong Kong Institute of Directors, and the representative from the Tourism Bureau there in Hong Kong was saying that for next year, they have 18 major events in Hong Kong. 18. It's not one or two, 18. And this is something that we should be thinking about in Macau. We have the rooms. Now they're available.
Yes.
Let's put them to good use.
Thank you. José Luís, Salles Marques, and Henry Lei, on this and also on Hangqin.
Well, I think that I agree with what was said before in regard to the competition. Of course, we just need to be better than them. That's the challenge, right? And I think that we have mentioned several things, but I think that Greater Bay Area is something we haven't mentioned yet. But the idea that I have in regard to tourism and Greater Bay Area is that this should be sold somehow as a comprehensive destination with the multiple different kinds of attractions. I think that could be something workable in the future. And in regard to access to the Chinese market, well, you know that IEM organized several workshops with IPIM just to address the issues of how to export the mainland market. So it's truly a problem. It's difficult, but I think maybe government can help in the future.
Thank you. Henry Lei, market access to the mainland and Hangqin.
I'm also on the optimistic side, and I agree with the comments of the other speakers. With the market of 1.4 billion, okay, it is not difficult, okay, to attract so-called enough tourists given Macau's current capacity. I believe that we do not expect 2019's figures of almost 40 million, nor the gaming revenue of such as 290 billion, but we want a smooth transition and recovery from the current pandemic situation to a stable income. For example, with the target of approximately like 130 billion to 150 billion, that allows the casinos to survive.
Gross gaming revenue,
yes,
right?
Gross gaming revenue. That allows the casinos to survive. That offer the Macau government probably so-called short of fiscal revenue income that is enough for the annual budget. That is not difficult. The point is, when visitors from China comes to Macau, we, in light theory, we define them as regional tourists, which is the backbone of like tourism market. More importantly, It is so convenient that tourists from mainland China, they can walk to cross the gate to come to Macau. This is a sort of advantage that our major competitors cannot enjoy. That's why I am somehow optimistic on such.
Interesting point. We will need to wrap up our talk, and before we finish, I'd like to ask each one of our esteemed guest speakers as a final word, your last message, concluding remarks in a nutshell. Kevin Ho, please.
Well, I'll use today's tagline to wrap up today's talk on Macau's economy, the way forward, because there's no way backward that we can go. Let's move forward.
Thank you. So moving forward, Rui Pedro Cunha.
Moving forward, I think we have to look to Hengqin and see what opportunities lie there. We need to get better clarity on what are the rules and what is going to happen in the next few months. And we need to get the business community more involved in what's happening in Hengqin, because I think that's going to bring a lot of news in the next few months.
Thank you. Hengqin, the way forward as well?
Yes, of course, and freedom of movement. and let's keep our fingers crossed for the next few months.
Yes. Professor Henry Lay, mobility, prosperity.
Be patient, be prepared, and be forward-looking.
That's right, Kayao, right? Yes, we'll always have Macau. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, our distinguished panel of speakers, Kevin Ho, Rui Pedro Cunha, José Luís Salles Marques, and Henry Lay. Thank you all for joining us here at Rui Cunha Foundation, and for those of you who have been following us via Facebook. On behalf of Macau Business, I would like to again thank Rui Cunha Foundation. We also have here, as a fortunate coincidence, Vice President Rui Pedro Cunha. Our word of thanks to the founder and president Rui Cunha, to Filipe Guadalupe and Carlos and Fred and the whole team that has been helping us throughout these years in this exciting project, which is the MBtv Rui Cunha Foundation Debate Series. We'll be back in a few weeks, perhaps next month, most likely. Thank you very much, and stay tuned. Thank you.